Yeah, we're back here again with another Jazz Matters podcast. Today, we got my good friend Billy G from way back in the day, and we're going to get into his head about this music we call jazz. Me and G go back a long ways, and also I want to let you know that Vaughn Coulter is here with me as usual.
Yes, as usual.
Yes, and we'll go ahead and kick this thing off. So, Billy, go ahead and let the people out there know a little something about you. You know, where you're from and what got you started in this music.
Sure, be glad to. Originally from Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm not ashamed to say that I'm every bit of 71 and a half years old as of last March. I started playing in high school, fellas, just like a lot of us. Back in those days, I was playing, trumpet in a high school band, but the piano was my first instrument. And back in those days, I was doing arrangements of tunes that I'd hear on the radio. I think Cannonball Adderley's Jive Samba was the first one I wrote out for our marching band. So that kind of rocked it. Got a big thrill out of that. And probably by the time I got to the ninth grade, I'd gotten together with some of my little buddies, who were also listening to Blue Note recordings. Those who are from Atlanta, old school Atlanta, might remember from back in the early, I'll say late 50s, early 60s. A guy named Herb Lance used to do a jazz show on WERD here in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. The Good Word Station, they called it.
Yeah.
And Herb played some of the greatest jazz, man. This was back in the days of the early Blue Note stuff. So we're talking Art Blakey, Lee Morgan, Freddie Hubbard, Herbie Hancock, all that crowd.
Yeah.
And that was that. As far as I was concerned, I had died and gone to heaven then. So that was it. And I might say too, looking back on it, whenever somebody would say something to me about blues, because the South is the home of the blues, also. Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama.
No doubt.
Mm-hmm. But I feel rather ashamed to say that back then my mindset was this: well, that blues is easy. Anybody, it ain't but 3 chord changes, so anybody can do the blues. That was my mindset, if you want to call it having a mind back then. Yeah. And it wasn't until many years later, when I was actually doing a gig somewhere on Campbellton Road. That was another place here back in the day where a lot of really great stuff was happening there. What was it? Lamars Regal Room was one of my favorite hangouts. And what was the place across the street?
Well, that place changed names so many times.
Yeah, really.
It was the Mahogany, I think, the last time.
And but I was hanging out in the days when Ollie Woodson, who ended up being a fantastic lead singer for the Temptations, was doing a 6-nighter there, man.
Yeah.
And,
wow.
Oh, it was fabulous. I'd sit there with 1 beer and try to nurse that 1 beer through at least 2 steps. Trying to hear as much of that great music as I could, man. It was a thrill. I lived in the neighborhood at the time. But anyway, across the street from that joint, I'll think of it eventually, I suppose. But across the street from that was Lamar's Regal Room, which frankly was kind of a hole in the wall, man. But a lot of great music, a lot of great musicians, were there. And
that place you was talking about, that place across from where you were talking about was 200 South, wasn't it?
The 200 South. That was the name. Thank you. Yeah. That's right. And it had some great musicians there, man. And I really think Ollie Woodson dead now, rest his soul. But that cat played the drums. He played the organ. He could sing the roof off the house, man. It was really a thrill. Because, it was like a master class for me just to sit there and listen. you know. And like most of us, that's how I learned a lot of stuff. But it was during it. So this must have been, I'm going to say maybe early to mid 60s, maybe. I was working at Lamars Regal room with a guy who called himself B.B. King Jr.
Right.
And I doubt seriously if there was any, real, family connection there. But this guy
BB had 18 kids.
Well, now he's two enough, and he might have been one of them.
He might have been,
that may very well be the case. But at any rate, suffice it to say that he was an official blues man.
Yeah.
And this guy would do the first tune on every set. He called it out. He'd say slow blues in the key of B, not in the key of B flat, which is easier for most people, early on, but in the key of B. So those same 3 chord changes that I said was so easy beat my ass to death up on that stage. Man, I wanted to not walk out. I wanted to run out of there. It was so so, and
oh my gosh.
Interestingly enough, at that point in my life, I was sharing an apartment over on Peachtree Road with a Jewish guy, a fellow Buddhist who's from New York. And I walked in with my head hanging down. I said, man, I messed around here and got on this blues gig, and I don't know what to do. And he said, oh, you doing the blues? He said, man, let me turn you on to Jimmy Reed. And all that, you got me running.
Yeah.
And I said, I see the light. Like I can hear the angels singing. Oh. So that's just my way of saying that it took me until I was well into my 20s to gain a real appreciation for the blues and the connection that it has to the music that we love and we're talking about now, which is called.
Right.
And like Edwin and I were talking yesterday, the blues, in any way you slice it, it's responsible for everything that goes on in American popular music today. You name it: rock and roll, jazz, R&B, country.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
All of that stuff, man, is connected to the blues. And me with my Atlanta snobbish Negro self, couldn't see that.
Oh my goodness.
When I was 14 or 15 years old, because Atlanta really it has this kind of snobbishness to it, Those who've been around here a while understand that. So that's what I was suffering from. And it wasn't until many years later, when I was at the tail end of my studies at the Berklee College of Music there in Boston, I at the same time I was teaching at one of the local high schools. And I decided to do a unit on the blues. And I messed around and got a hold of, reading material, videos and that sort of thing, documentary stuff. And that really took me on to the outer limits in terms of seeing the connection between the blues, those same 3, I said 3 chord changes, but those of us who've been listening and paying attention and playing this stuff know there's a lot more going on than just 3 chords,
right?
But while we're on the subject, I'll say it's the feeling that is emanated from that music. Hearing these animals go, oh, baby, you don't have to go. All that kind of stuff. And you're not going to get that from Mozart. And
no, you're right. Absolutely.
They don't roll that way. You
Right.
got to go to Jimmy Reed and Howlin' Wolf, who is Lonnie Smith, all these cats,
Right.
man. Meet BB and all of them, Albert King, for that sort of thing. And the mistake that I was making as a young guy was that I think there was a part of me that sort of wanted to intellectualize the music. And there is a lot there that you can intellectualize on. Excuse me, but ultimately, it's all about that feeling. You know, I had the experience. I don't think I ever told you about this, bro. But I had the experience. There was an apartment complex near what we used to call Fair Street Bottom here in Atlanta. All right, right up the street from Clark Atlanta University, Morehouse.
Absolutely, sure is.
Okay.
Yeah,
Down in the bottom, and
in the bottom. Yes, sir.
Okay, you know what I'm talking about now. So now back in those days,
I know well because I took more around.
Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. So in that part of town, man, you didn't want to go down there after dark unless you was wearing body armor and driving a Sherman tank and carrying a bazooka, you know. But they had an apartment complex there called.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about? The bird. Well, there was a nightclub in the apartment complex, the University Homes Apartments, maybe. Well, I think that might have been the name of it.
Right.
There was a club there
right behind Clark.
Right. Okay. Called the Bird Cage, and in fact, it was more or less next door to theater. There was a theater that was, you know, in the black neighborhood, right? But anyway, so there was this nightclub there called the Bird Cage, where I used to hang out, even though I was far from 21. But you know, I had a beard and a phony ID from F.W. Woolworth saying I was 21. You know, and man, that was another instructional period in my life because I got a chance to see Mongo Santa Maria there, Billy Paul, Cannonball Adderley, and in fact, it was at the Bird Cage, you guys, that I heard that Fender Rhodes electric piano for the first time. Joe Zawinul was playing with Cannonball in, and love at first sight. I said, I don't know where that thing came. It looks like a piano. I said, I got to get one by hook or crook, you know. Right. So that was an experience too. But they had jam sessions back in those days, and a formative, a really instructional experience from back then was this. They had a jam session probably one Saturday afternoon, and I was there to sit in with my 19 and a half or 20-year-old self. And so I'm playing one of the only two tunes that I knew that might be appropriate for a gig like that. All right. And so just like a lot of young players, what I was inclined to do was to try to crowd every musical idea that I'd ever heard in my 20 years of living into one solo. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Preferably playing fast as I could. You know, James Brown used to do a tune called Talking Loud and Saying Nothing. And that was about like me. I was playing fast and saying nothing. You play it, and I learned, you know, eventually there's a difference between playing notes and playing music. But I didn't know that then. So in the middle of my solo, if you want to call it that, my fingers got tired. And I couldn't come up with just two notes. I went bad boom. And some guy in the back of the room said, yeah. And I said, whoa. I managed to accomplish with two notes what I was trying to accomplish with 2,000 notes. And it taught me a lesson, you know, because as I think about it now, it could have just as easily been one note if it had been one well-placed note. So you get into this thing about, you know, the difference between quantity and quality. And Edwin, I know you've heard this one too. They say the notes that you don't play are as important as the notes that you do play.
Right. I mean, think about Basie when you're talking about that. You know how Basie used to end at ding, 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 and that was it.
Scarcity. Yeah. Economy. That's a better word. You know, economy of musical ideas. You know, and Miles too. You know, similar kind of thing with Miles. You know.
Well, let me ask you something now. Sure. How do you see the culture of jazz music changing? You know, now from the years you've been playing and everything. Well, how do you see the culture changing? Is it moving in a more positive direction, or is it moving in more of a commercial, you know, electronic situation?
I think I'm inclined to go with choice B on that, and I feel sometimes necessary that it is necessary rather to to apologize for being so old school, old fashioned and dinosaurish and stuff, because I think it's a great idea to learn all 12 keys, and be able to play in all 12 of them. A good buddy of mine here, somebody I went to high school with, a bass player named Scott Edwards, played with Stevie Wonder's band for many, many years. And he used to tell me stories about things that happened, when they were hanging out with Stevie. And he said that once that Stevie had this penchant for taking a song that was in his repertoire, say that, You're the Sunshine of My Life or whatever, and doing it in some key other than the key that it was written in for the rest of the band. Okay? And so the guys in Stevie's band would say, well, wait a minute, Stevie, the song is written in F and here you are in A flat. What's up with that? And Stevie would laugh. He said, well, what's the problem? Say, you mean you're a professional musician and you can't play in all 12 keys? What's So that was a lesson to me too, because, those of us who've done a lot of work in that area, understand that, once you learn a song in the key of C or the key of F or G or whatever, then if you really know your instrument, you can transpose it to any one of the other 11 keys.
Now, G, there was one thing that you were saying about that, and I'm gonna piggyback right at the end of that. Yeah. I've seen players that play predominantly for whatever reason they were, gospel players, and they would play these songs. And I used to look at where the hand was on the keyboard, and I hear the tones and everything different. And it took me a minute, but I asked them, how are they playing these voices in the key of C, but the song is actually in B flat? They say, well, I have this pitch control, a transposer is what it was.
All right.
And I was like, but you need to learn to play the black keys every now and then. It would help. It would help. I mean, and like you say, and in all the other keys of the instrument, you need to kind of know how to play in those keys on the keyboard without the transposer. But I noticed that a lot of younger people was doing that, and basically, I think it came down to them improper or maybe no training. You know what I'm saying? It probably was one of those kind of things that I had run into, but I remember running into that years ago, and I couldn't figure out how he was playing in the key of B, but he was forming another chord in the middle of the keyboard that was not that, and it was a transposer.
Well, to your earlier point, that is exactly one of the things that that I moan about, so to speak, because okay, it's like this. You got a kid in a math class, and you say, okay, I want you to go home and study the multiplication table. And the kid says, well, what do I need to learn the multiplication table for? I got a little device in my hand here that I bought for $1 that I add, subtract, multiply, divide all the way out to 10 decimal places. So what do I? And so, I mean, and that's a valid point. So you understand what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Right. So it's the same thing in music. You can do it the easy way and just press a button that'll transpose it for you automatically from the key to from C to E flat or A flat or whatever. But I think that where you miss out is the let's call it the brain gymnastics that you go through in actually learning. If I'm playing this song in the key of C, if I learned it in the key of C, and all of a sudden somebody wants to do it in F sharp, okay, well the second chord change in the key of C is D minor 7. So I've got to be able to say, well, if I'm playing in F sharp, then I know that the second chord change is going to be G sharp minor 7. It's a real mathematical process. A lot of similarities between math and music. We haven't talked about that any. But I had one of the math teachers over at Spelman, and we got to talking about that once, and and she said, well, "What you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm studying math and music." I said, "I know it sounds like an odd combination." She says, "Oh no," she says, "Math and music are very similar." And I said, "Well, do you mean in terms of whole note gets 4 counts, half note gets 2 counts?" And she says, "Well, yeah, that." She says, "But," she says, "the logic that is involved, is very similar." And I know both of you guys will understand me when I say this, that part of what makes music listenable is I'll call it the mathematical tendency for you to be able to anticipate what the next note or the next chord change is going to be. That's
Right.
that's what keeps so now you can't have too much of that. You got to balance, the predictable with the unpredictable.
Yeah.
With the
Yeah.
pride.
That is so
but
true.
But it is a very, very mathematical process going on there. And heaven knows one of these days I'm going to find out why it is that the octave was divided into 12 parts as opposed to 13 or 10 or
Yeah.
15 and a half.
Right.
But
So
that is that's
Vaughn,
another
you want
aspect.
to roll into this, Vaughn, for?
Yeah, the conversation is so rich and full of amazing um, um, levels of what music does to you, and because I'm to the point, and me being a musician myself, and for the time that I had spent time learning trombone and dabbling in the acoustic bass a little bit, I didn't really get an opportunity to really step into it like that, and study music. I would be in the rehearsal room rehearsing up over and over and over again to see where I could take to. And it was funny. I know one day I finally got a chance solo in the jazz band, and I was just messing around with a different playing it out of the key, and it worked. and the director looked at me and he said, "What did you do?" And I was like, "I know." And he said, "Well, you did it well." I was surprised because you knew how to go into another key and that solo right. And it just kind of made me, surprised me. It took me to a whole nother level. And I said, I could never do that again because I was frightened. But it just, it just took, a while to understand that, you have to really trust your instincts and know. You really have to know the different key levels. You have to know different octaves and key changes and to move. But that all comes through improvisation. And so, I think that it's surprising that I can only picture it's like if you were playing with Miles and Herbie Hancock on piano, and he said Herbie, we at him, and he takes a song to another in another, and the rest of the musicians are looking at it. It's like, oh, here we go, and they're used to that. They're used to that, and that's when that you really get with these guys, do some of these jam sessions, and experience what that's like firsthand. So I commend you being able to finding that and stepping in there and really, really learning the music like that. I really do.
Well, it's a lot of work involved. And Edwin and I were talking yesterday about one of my experiences when I was living in Los Angeles, man. I went to a jazz club there in downtown LA and was sitting in with some guys, some young guys, who were playing all this Chick Corea type stuff, the jazz rock, the fusion thing, and,
Oh,
jamming.
yeah.
But then I said, okay, well, look here, let's do a blues in the key of F, 12-bar blues. Man, they looked at me like I had just landed in a spaceship from somewhere. So, the blues, what is that? What in the world is that?
And the blues in LA of all places.
In the key of F, Oh,
I know they looked at you like, what?
It was and the main point is this, whether or not those guys realize it, it's almost as though they had decided to try to learn how to run or fly before they could either crawl or walk.
Right.
It has to be a succession of things. First you start out crawling, then you walk, and then you run, then you fly. But that isn't where a lot of people are at nowadays. I guess there's this kind of impatience about being able to perform, and I can appreciate that, but again, you want to get a foundation. I mean, it's just like being in an English class. The teacher asks you to write an essay. You say, well, wait a minute, teacher, I haven't learned the alphabet yet.
Well, let me ask. Well, G, let me
Exactly.
ask you one more
That's what it
question,
is.
man, because we're getting a little short on time here, and I
Yeah.
know that I know between me and you, we can talk a long time. But
Forever.
what I wanted to find out from you, basically, do you think that that the culture from the old days, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and the culture of today, uh, how much do you think that has changed as far as the young musician today? Do you see where they are actually listening to the music from the old days? Or are they basically coming up with their own concept?
If you had asked me a year ago, man, I probably would have had a different answer. But I'm going to say that there is a connection, and not necessarily one that I felt intrinsically, but it became apparent to me when I found out that a guy who does a DJ who does a show in Los Angeles on Thursday nights, his show is devoted to basically teaching people or instructing folks about the connections between today's hip hop music and old school jazz. And you've got some cats, man. I recall seeing Ron Carter on there once recently. They're not seeing, and the guys who are really hip, the hip hoppers who really know, what time it is, so to speak. Mm-hmm. They know who Miles Davis is. They know who Clifford Brown, all that crowd,
right?
John Coltrane,
right.
Count all these people. And even if their music is not going to be reflective of a lot of that influence, they do appreciate the contributions that these people have made. And some of them will take, they'll sample something that Miles did or something that Cannonball did. Right. And throw a rap on top of it. And next thing you know, they're receiving a Grammy Award for it. Yeah. American Music Awards show or something like that.
Right, exactly.
So
exactly.
I think that to answer your question again, I think that there is a connection, and the people who are really hip, the ones who are sincere, and that's really what it gets down to. I used to tell students all the time that, with regard to learning how to play, that an ounce of sincerity is worth a pound of technique. So it's fine and dandy that you have learned all 12 major scales, and you can run them up and down and keep it fine. That's wonderful, but can you play those two notes that I was talking about a little while ago?
Right.
That'll make somebody say, yeah, and take a sip of the beer. All right. So that was the most important lesson for me. Being able to make that connection. And I think regardless as to the genre of music that you're talking about, if your heart is really in it, if you're trying to please that person out there who's nursing that one beer, because that's all they can afford. If you're trying to please that person and that person knows it, job well done.
Cool.
Indeed.
All right, Vaughn, we're up against the clock now. So what do you have anything else to add as far as
I was just curious to ask G out. Are you still teaching in LA now?
No, I'm back in Atlanta. And honest to goodness, as much as I love teenagers, if I never see another one in life, it'll be too soon.
I know the feeling. I have a 16-year-old. I know the feeling. Don't worry about that.
Okay, so what
But
I'm
the thing about it is, I grew up in LA. Born and raised in Compton. And
Okay.
you know, just being, you know, having you here and you talk about, you know, stuff that's going on in LA, it kind of reminded me, it took me back home for a bit. And even when you talked to the bottoms down there, Morris Brown and Clark, and I
Yeah.
remember those days distinctly. So I know exactly what you're talking about, my friend.
Well, listen, I didn't know we had those kinds of connections, but
But yeah, I was just
yeah.
kind of curious to see where you taught sweat when you were in LA.
My first job was at University High School. That's in West LA. If you can picture, say, I'm gonna say maybe, what would that be? Not Pico, but say Santa Monica and the 405 freeway. Yeah,
I know where it is.
that
Yeah.
part. Yeah, not a bad area, but now back in the day, you know, when you were there originally, you know, it was, you know, you had the sons and daughters of all of these hotty toddy movie stars that went to that high school. And by the time I got there,
I know.
by the time I got there, it was a bunch of LaQuishas and Jose's and Marias and Lil Wayne's and people like that, you know. But that was a great experience. It really was.
Yeah.
And because of my own personal experiences, you know, my own biography, I'll say, you know, it was easy for me to connect with youngsters, you know, from the hood, you know, and I was able to talk to them, maybe in ways that the other teachers were not. So it was really a great.
Okay. Okay. Good. Good.
Yeah.
So
you know,
what we're gonna do, we're gonna go ahead and wrap this one up, and we're gonna probably I know we're gonna get back with you again, G, and we're gonna have another discussion, and we're gonna go a little deeper into the music aspects of it.
That'd be great.
And we'll definitely you know be back on. Now, is there any like, do you have a website or how do you communicate through the social media platform?
Not yet, and I really should, because everybody's got a website but me. But my email address, you can reach me that way easily enough. Billy G12, BILLYGEE, followed by the number 12 at gmail.com. And I'm also using the same name, Billy G, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Okay. This is Edwin Williams and Vaughn Coulter. Edwin Williams, you can check us out at yesjazzmatters.org. And Vaughn, you can give out your information.
Jazzbeatsradio.com. Instagram is Vaughn Coulter, and my new Twitter page is Ain't Nothing But Soul One. Ain't Nothing But Soul One. So just check me out.
All right. And yeah, we're gonna see. We wrapped up another one. So this Monday coming, we'll be doing another podcast, and we'll do them every Monday until this pandemic is over and beyond. And we're glad to have you, G. And thanks for showing up. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Enjoyed it. Nice to meet you, Vaughn.
Nice to meet you too, G. Stay safe out there, brother.
All right.
Let's hook it up. All right. Peace out.